Just wondering what you might think about that.
Well, actually, I feel a little emotional. I didn't expect to feel like teary-eyed about that, but the love for this country, the country that, and there's one scene where great grandpa is saying about like they were talking about the love for the country, and then he was trying to explain that this is a country that deported me.
Yeah.
And that they still have this tremendous love for this country.
Well, hey there. Thanks for watching and being a part of An American Reckoning. Reed and I had a chance recently to sit down and have a conversation with Brian Kimmel, author of Blue Skies, Troubled Waters, and a little bit about Brian before we show the interview. Brian co-authored this edition of the book. It could be called the third edition, but Brian prefers to think of it more of a revitalization and a revisioning of this book, which was originally authored by his grandmother, Martha Wallendow, also with the nickname Ath in the story. So what is Blue Skies? I'll read this description of the book from Brian Kimmel's website, briankimmel.com. Blue Skies, Troubled Waters is the astonishing true story of twin sisters Ath and I'm going to say Kath because it's spelled the same as Ath but with a K, but it could be Kath. Ath, remember, is Brian Kimmel's grandma. American name is Martha Wallendow Lone. Ath and Kath, whose idyllic childhood in the 1930s New Jersey is shattered by their family's deportation to the jungles of Indonesia. Their new life, already a world away from everything they knew, is violently upended when Japan invades in 1941. At just 8 years old, the twins and their family are captured and imprisoned as civilian prisoners of war. This gripping memoir, co-authored by Ath's grandson, Brian, plunges the reader into the heart of a forgotten chapter of World War II. Through the innocent yet resilient eyes of young Ath and Kath, we witness the daily struggle for survival, the quiet acts of defiance, and the unwavering power of family in the face of unimaginable brutality. More than just a war story, this is a tale of hope, the strength of a community, and the enduring love between two sisters who refuse to be broken. Drawing on personal narrative, newly unearthed historical documents, maps, and poignant family photographs, Blue Skies, Troubled Waters is a meticulously researched and deeply moving account of survival, offering a testament to the indomitable human spirit. It was such a huge pleasure to talk with Brian. He's down to earth. He's likable, approachable. I met him a week prior to this interview at a Tacoma Reads anti-censorship gathering at one of the Tacoma public libraries. Blue Skies, Troubled Waters, it's an immigration story, relevant even today, especially with what's going on with immigration in the United States. It's a deportation story. It's a war story. It's about struggle and the survival of a family through love and the human bond. For me, it was a message of hope during a time of immense despair. And ultimately, Reed and I discuss with Brian the question of what is it that makes us American, and how Ath's story and Brian Kimmel's story and his heritage answer that question. Brian, in addition to being an author, is a mental health counselor, a dance movement therapist, an artist, a musician, a poet. And I'll share links in the description below this video, this interview, where you can get more information and videos about Brian, other interviews he's done, more information about Blue Skies, Troubled Waters, and all things Brian Kimmel. I hope you enjoy. Thanks again for tuning in.
My name is Brian Kimmel, and I am a mental health counselor, master's level mental health counselor in the state of Washington, a supervisor, educator, and a registered dance movement therapist. So I do a lot of creative and expressive work and somatic work and trauma healing in a private practice in Seattle area, but also virtually. And I'm also a Dharma teacher in the Plum Village tradition of engaged Buddhism, and studied with the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh for over 25 years, and traveled with the community. I currently travel to teach as well, now teaching virtually. I've been a musician. I have a lot of different things, and obviously a writer and an author of several books. I have a forthcoming book, Embodying Narratives, which is the kind of behind the scenes of my counseling practice, but also how I weaved in meditation and mindfulness, engaged Buddhism. So behind the scenes of my counseling practice, meditation, but also my writing process and doing research for the book, Blue Skies, Troubled Waters, on my family's experience and what that was like.
So I met you only about a week ago at the Tacoma Read in Tacoma Public Library. And you were there as one of the hosts on the panel.
Yep.
And I got to hear you sing a cappella. There's a song briefly mentioned at the beginning of the book. And it was such a pleasure. And since that time, my brother Reed and I got the book, have read it, and we got some questions for you.
You have a lot of different tabs.
Yeah. Is there any way you would want to introduce this book on what it's about first before we get into detail?
Yeah, it's primarily my grandma's story, Blue Skies, Troubled Waters, an American twin. So my maternal grandmother, is the American twin. She was born in New Jersey in 1933 and deported in 1940 because of her father's undocumented status. Her father had come from Manado, Indonesia, which is in the northeast part of the archipelago during the Dutch East Indies period. And he literally jumped ship into Brooklyn Harbor and swam to shore and lived undocumented, married, and then had my grandmother and her twin, and then gave himself up to immigration authorities who deported him. And so they journeyed by boat to Indonesia. For my grandmother, it was the first time being in Indonesia. And then when they landed, and then about a year and a half later, Japan forces occupied what was then the Dutch East Indies, and they became prisoners of war. So the story is first part of the journey from New Jersey, and then what being deported was like, and taking the journey, and then being prisoners of war for 3.5 years. Their experience going in the jungle to escape famine and the bombings, but also the end of the book is about their freedom. And I added the afterword and a bunch of other resources for the book.
Yeah, I really appreciated the resources at the end. It was kind of a nice surprise, getting the breakdown of the timeline and the names and the family members. So when it was your great-grandfather, right, that jumped off the boat?
My great-grandfather, yeah.
When he jumped off the boat, or I actually should say when he was deported, that was because of the 1940 Asian exclusion in national origin?
So there was the Asian Exclusion Act, I think was the Hatch Act, or I can't remember, I mix up the names, but I think it was around the 1925. And the Asian Exclusion Act prevented people, not just Asia, it was other countries too, but we're focusing on Asia in this part of it, that excluded them from being able to enter the country to begin with, but also to become citizens if they were in the country already. And at that time, the Philippines was a territory of the United States. So my grandfather, and the Philippines is very close to where my grandmother was during the war and where he was born and was raised. And so he essentially impersonated someone of Philippine, someone from the Philippines, in order to get a job, and because they know they wouldn't, say anything.
Sure.
So that's what he wrote in his letter of confession to the immigration services when they asked you to write your story. And so he wrote the story that, I impersonated being from the Philippines. And then, of course, they discovered that he wasn't from the Philippines. And because he wasn't, he got deported. So if he were from the Philippines, he would have been able to stay. But he wasn't, and so that was the Asian Exclusion Act lasted all the way up until the 1960s, I believe.
Wow, that long. And so that was before Japan bombed Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
So do you have any more context or background on the Asian Exclusionary Act and why it came about, or was it sort of like a re-envisioning of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882?
Same thing. Same thing. They just expanded it for other groups from Asia, and then Africa and other places. It's the same act, the Chinese Exclusion Act, the Asian Exclusion Act. They were all kind of in together. At first, it was specifically for Chinese folks and people of Chinese heritage, as I believe, but it was also that same act that deported my great-grandfather and my grandmother was the same that imprisoned Japanese Americans. So they used that same sort of tactic, and they, meaning our government, the United States government, to imprison people of Japanese heritage and folks who were Japanese.
So your great-grandfather, he jumped off the boat, what was it, in
1926?
26.
That's when he first landed in the U.S.
And then they were deported in 1940. So 14 years they had been living here.
Yep.
And was it during that time they were involved with Salvation Army?
Yep, Salvation Army. They were volunteers and doing ministry with the Salvation Army. So they were citizens. And working, because my grandmother had birthright citizenship, actually. So that term, birthright citizenship, that was my grandmother. Because she was,
Is it? Do you say Ath? Is that how you?
Ath is so Martha is her name. Martha Lone. Walando is her maiden name. Lone is her married name. So my grandfather's name.
Yeah.
It gets very confusing with all the people.
No, you broke it down good though.
I tried.
Again, the family tree at the end is helpful. So they were contributing. Simply put, contributing members to society and being involved with Salvation Army.
Yep.
So your grandfather, was it just a voluntary decision to turn himself in?
Yeah, my great-grandfather. So grandma's father, he had a guilty conscience, and because he was a practicing Christian and he believed in doing the right thing, and so he lived by his conscience, and so it was just wearing on him. And he could not continue to live by Christian values and be in the country and impersonating someone from the Philippines, being from the Philippines, and he wanted to just confess.
So guilt caught up to him.
And he also believed that he had a chance because he had contributed to society and that he had a chance to stay. And that's why so many people, including a U.S. representative and Salvation Army and other folks during that time in New Jersey and New York, tried to, they did write letters to the president at the time and the government to help him to stay. And it was to no avail. They just,
no avail.
Yeah, it didn't work.
And so he couldn't have known or wouldn't have thought that the impact it could have on his whole family, or expect them to follow him if he was deported, which is what they ended up doing, right? They chose, it was just a choice. They didn't want to be separated. So
exactly. They could have stayed as a family, like my grandmother's mom and her twin and herself could have stayed, but then they wouldn't have had their father here. So, so that was a choice that the family goes all together.
Yep. What is remarkable to me is that your grandmother was 6 at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yeah.
And throughout the course of the book, which is about 5-6 years, by the end she's maybe 11.
Yeah, 12.
Yeah. And as you read what they go through, that kept coming back to me as, my gosh, this 6 to 11-year-old is seeing these things, experiencing these things, behaving and thinking like an adult,
right?
What we would consider an adult,
right?
And the fact that she remembered it so vividly. I mean, what is her memory just like?
Her memory is very good.
Yeah.
Still today, so she's 91 now.
Yeah.
And the cover on the book that we currently have is her when she was 19.
That's 19.
Yeah, so just after several years after the war. But the thing to remember is that she started off in the United States, and really she spent time at the Big Apple in New York. So she was a city girl, and she was also an American girl. So she was very Americanized. The story that she often says if she's out talking with folks is that they didn't eat bread, they ate rice in Indonesia. So she had to learn rice culture. She had to learn to eat rice, and Indonesians eat a lot of rice.
Yeah.
So she didn't have bread like she was used to in the United States. So that's just one example of how she had to learn to be Indonesian because she was American, living in rural Indonesia.
Maybe not a question so much as I'd like to get your perspective on the issue of, the Chinese Exclusion Act and the Asian Exclusion Act. We have the U.S. doing what is described in the book, deporting people of Asian descent, putting them in the concentration camps. And at the same time, you have German Americans absolutely not being targeted or singled out by the U.S. government in any way. Despite the fact, and I don't know if you got into this or you were familiar with it, since before America entered World War I, at the time there had been a saboteur ring of German agents in the U.S. that had been very active up and down the eastern seaboard, down into Mexico, and they had succeeded in doing some pretty dramatic acts of sabotage against the U.S. war effort in World War I and continuing on afterwards. Things like they successfully mailed an explosive package to the White House and blew up a cloakroom in the White House. They successfully blew up the ammunition depot on Black Tom Island in New York Harbor.
Wow.
Which is why the Statue of Liberty torch was damaged. You can no longer go up there.
Oh.
The shrapnel from the explosion actually damaged it and made the replacement, and now you can't go into the torch. I wonder if I could, and this, they had engaged in sabotage of especially American shipping up until right into World War I. And I was wondering if I can get maybe your opinion or just thoughts about the fact that as U.S. entered World War II with really the two separate enemies, Germany and Japan, what are your comments about the fact that one group was so heavily stigmatized, the people of Asian descent, versus the other group, Germans? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I think about control. I think about where we want to control as a country, as the United States. And what people don't realize is that European powers, so we're talking about World War II, correct?
Correct.
I know that things were happening
beforehand.
beforehand.
Right. I mean, what I was getting at is you had the two groups, which, especially after Pearl Harbor, the United States had
Right.
definitely declared war against
Sure.
Germany and Japan. But you never had in the United States the same, you didn't have Germans being packed off to camps and their property being seized, or you didn't have them being deported to the extent you did people who were from, Japan and Asia, that area.
Or people who looked like Germans
Exactly.
being ridiculed in schools or taken out, or immigration forces saying, where's your card, or what's your citizenship, etc. And the part of I know that the United States government, of what I know, really concentrated on the West Coast specifically. So in Seattle, just in Bainbridge Island, for instance, there's those more famous photos of Japanese heritage folks being pretty much marched out of Bainbridge Island onto a ferry, in which they went and they were taken to Puyallup, I believe, which is now the state fairgrounds.
Right.
But what I was going to share is that during that time, what people don't often think of is that there was a large control of the Pacific, and the Pacific Rim is a vast place. I mean, it's huge. And the United States particularly also was controlling the Pacific, wanting to control the Pacific, because of land, because of resources, because of controlling economic matters in the region. So the U.S. was a part of that, and that's why this whole conversation about the Philippines, and which I find so fascinating, and I didn't really know so much about that. I don't know too much about the Philippines. I tried to know as much as I can about Indonesia, and that's enough because there's so much going on. But Japan was a rising force at that time, and they had used all the technology and all the influences that they had commandeered from trade and exposure to so-called Western or European and the United States cultures. So they were up and coming. And the thing that I just discovered, I think I mentioned it maybe at the library, but there were, in the 1920s, they had laid communication cables underneath the sea, close to where my great-grandfather was from, in Indonesia. And that caused an international conflict because powers were wanting to control that area because of the underwater cables. And there was
the U.S. that laid those cables?
It was an international. So Japan, it was Japan and I think the Netherlands, because it was the Dutch East Indies, and so there was already international conflicts because those cables were for communication. And then you have oil, you have other resources, and most of Asia was divvied up for European powers in the United States. So the United States had Guam, we had Virgin Islands, we had Midway Atoll and other places in Micronesia, the Philippines. So we were in the area, but it's way far away from the contiguous United States. And we had to protect that space because we wanted it.
Right.
And I say we because I'm a United States citizen. It was my government. And so the rising power of Japan, and who doesn't have as many natural resources, and so needs it to fuel their rising economy. And that's the context of World War II in terms of Asia. And Japan was taking over other parts of Asia as well and expanding their empire, mostly because of resources.
Common thread
A common thread.
of imperialist behavior.
I mean, yeah. I mean, usually it's around resources or control of communication, control of where resources go.
And that's interesting because that, again, draws a parallel to a little bit later in the book, once the Japanese have occupied the events surrounding radio communications.
Right.
And the radio tower, radio station that's built in your grandmother's front yard.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure, yeah.
Just the whole concept that communication, especially at this point, was becoming a commodity in and of itself.
Sure.
I mean, the islands are valuable not just for their natural resources, but for strategic landing strips, fuel depot, radio communications.
Yep.
What was your great grandfather's background? What surprised me was just like how technologically inclined he was, and like he was like, we got to get the radio, and he knew how to contact the U.S. and share information. It sounded like, and so what was his background?
He was savvy for sure. I mean, his family was farmers. I don't know that he had some machinery training, and he was a highly educated person and just a real world person, and got the skills that he needed for whatever he was doing. I think of him because how daring it was for him to get on a ship in rural Indonesia and travel to the United States, and how by boat, and that vision, and how he was able to have some kind of vision and some kind of daring to come to the United States, because United States was the place to be, one of the places to be. If you wanted opportunity, if you wanted to learn more about and bring home to your culture. I don't know that he thought about he was going to bring home these technologies to his culture, but I'm not sure what was in his head.
Yeah, and he came alone when he came from.
Well, that's the question. That is the question, because I don't know. There was a census report. I don't recall the date, but the census report listed that he was living in a house with someone from the Philippines and someone else from the Dutch East Indies. Okay. So his identity, he always listed in the documents that I've seen, and this is post-publishing the book. So I've done the reverse research of the book after the book was published. Sure. More research, and because more has been discovered, and more is not censored, but unclassified and things. So things were kind of
declassified.
Yeah, things were kept secret for a long time, until like 5 years ago, and so some of this information is newly found, and one of the things were these census reports and that I discovered, and saying that he was around other people from the Dutch East Indies, which is interesting because you have to think about at that time. So the Indonesia, what we now call Indonesia, was part of the Dutch Empire, which also founded the United States. I don't know if you know the story about Manhattan.
New Amsterdam.
No.
New Amsterdam.
Yep.
So when I give the talk, usually I share, this is kind of what the opening thing about the Treaty of Run, which you can go down, which is called the Treaty of Breda. If you go to Manhattan, there's a plaque about Breda, is where this treaty was signed, where the British Empire traded Manhattan for the Spice Islands in Indonesia with the Dutch, because the Dutch had started New Amsterdam. That's Wall Street, is the wall around New Amsterdam.
Well, Bronx was the Bronx family farm.
And there you go.
That's where that comes from.
Right.
BRONCKS, I think they spelled it.
Right.
It was Dutch.
Yeah, which then became New York.
Right.
British.
Right.
So so the Dutch East Indies, if you weren't Dutch, you were kind of not really a citizen, a full citizen in the same way if you were Dutch in the Dutch East Indies, which is now Indonesia. So grandfather came over, and supposedly, I'm guessing that we were one of the first people from the Dutch East Indies in this region of New York area, because there's another group that said they came over around the 1940s or 50s, and we were here in the 1920s. So that's just an interesting fact. So I propose that he was with someone else on the ship. To answer your question,
No, it's good.
long way around. It's just difficult because Indonesia didn't exist as a country.
Right. Well,
So you can't
unofficial
measure.
documentation. Was your father at that point always being honest? I mean, if he was essentially trying to pass as someone from the Philippines, would he have filled out the census accurately?
Well, and he did, because he great grandpa, he mentioned Dutch East Indies, so that's was his nationality. So he was forthright about it, but maybe someone else wasn't.
Right.
Could have written whatever, but he was.
I feel like it's worth mentioning, their involvement in the Salvation Army. It prompted me to look into what the Salvation Army does, because...
Yeah, I'm not too familiar, actually. Other than the Christmas bells and things.
Oh, yeah? And that was
I know they
important
do
to me.
service work. But...
Yeah, exactly. And for 14 years, they were involved trying to contribute to America, and still got deported. So for those who aren't familiar with what exactly Salvation Army does, so I'm going to read a little bit here.
Sure.
It's an international evangelical part of the Christian church with a mission to preach the gospel and provide social services like food, shelter, and aid to those in need, regardless of their background. So it was founded in London in 1865.
London. Oh, okay.
Yeah. It is known for its distinctive military-style hierarchy, and its use of officers instead of traditional ministers, and its efforts to assist the homeless, hungry, and vulnerable. Right. So what are some of the services that it provides? Hunger relief, like food pantries and programs, homelessness services, shelters, social services and programs, disaster relief, assistance for those displaced by disasters, and other services like financial assistance in summer camps and more. So that was important to me to think like, this is what a contributing member of society is doing, these things for the country, and still they get deported.
It just didn't matter. Right. And the U.S. government could use the Asian Exclusion Act. That's just the common name for it. That's not really the name of it. They could use the Asian Inclusion. See, this is the method, and you just don't fit in this, and we can't legally let you in because there's this law saying that we can't. Right. And so even it didn't matter what you did it didn't matter how much you contributed. It just did not matter. You weren't welcome, and we're not going to keep you here.
The reunion of the family, getting into the sequence of events in the book. So when your great-grandfather's family saw your great-grandfather and grandmother, and your great-grandmother was so readily welcomed, even though she was Dutch, correct?
My great-grandma, so grandma's mom was Polish.
Polish.
who escaped Russian-occupied Poland, and who was also undocumented. And there had to be some intervention when she came into the country, also around the same 1920s. There's a lot going on in the world in the 1920s. So there was a lot going on leading up to World War II. In between World War I and World War II, there was a lot going on. And so she escaped Russian occupation, and she was a stowaway in a ship. And historically, though I think so. We were just reading up on World War II and just what an incredible time it was, nation building and just it was just such a
Yeah, if you want to step back, really big picture. I mean,
Oh, you had
my personal view is, you get to 1940s, World War II, and that was at the very tail end, starting in about the 1860s through about the 1940s. Everything in the world changed. You
Yeah.
had nations changing systems of government. You had countries falling. You had science coming to the fore.
Right.
Challenging religion for how society should define itself. You had medicine changing.
Yeah.
And it was just that period of time was one of the, electrification, all of these things. They all happened at the same time. And I think, one aspect of world culture after another fundamentally changed, until you get to the 1940s, and it's sort of the end of really the colonial era.
Right.
And the end of the concept that countries can just go and invade and occupy to take what they want out of some, militarily weaker nation.
Right.
To me, it's a fascinating period, precisely because there was so much going on, so much change, so much, just friction, so much going on. And it struck me when I read this section talking about at the very end, where just a few short years after World War II ends, suddenly you've got the Japanese fighting on the sides of your family, and
right after.
Yeah, right after.
Right after.
Because they were fighting to get the Dutch out and to get that out. And it, again, getting back to the idea of history repeating itself, it reminded me of an interview I saw this was in the 2000s, and there was a Viet Cong general who was being interviewed, and there was an American general who had fought in Vietnam. And they were sitting down talking, and the American said, you were a very worthy adversary. I have a lot of respect for how you fought and what you did. But the Vietnamese guy said, well, we didn't see it as, fighting a war for Russia. Right. We had just pushed the French out, and you were just the next invading army.
Right.
So from their perspective, it was just a continuation of the same old fight they'd already been having.
Yeah.
And in some ways, I saw a lot of parallels between that concept and what happened in the book of, we get done with World War II and we're going to switch sides, and now another force is being pushed out, and it's just...
It was within a couple of years, right?
Yeah.
That they were suddenly fighting with the Japanese.
It was right after Japanese surrendered, then the Japanese forces were helping stymie the revolutionaries who were then facing the British and the Dutch armies coming back.
Right.
And it was a very turbulent time. Yeah. Really turbulent.
Anyhow, let's get back to the subject of the book. There's so much to talk about, but
so when your great grandmother and grandfather arrived, and I want to make sure in
Minahasa.
Minahasa.
Minahasa, yeah.
Minahasa.
Means one people, and Minahasa is the term that became more popularized in the region for the region itself, Minahasa. And also the people. So it's a confederacy of 9 different tribes who got together to form one democratic community.
Yeah. And it sounds like an incredible community. I was wondering if you could speak to just how readily they were received. Of course, your great-grandfather, because he's coming home. But
when they were deported and then they landed in 1940 in this rural place in the Dutch East Indies, right? From Minahasa, yeah.
And I believe in the book it describes your great-grandmother and your great grandmother.
So grandma's grandma.
Yes. Grandma's
grandma.
When they first saw each
who
other.
was named after her, Marta. Marta was grandma's name, and she was named after her.
Okay.
So she meets her namesake for the first time.
Oh, wow. But it was the embrace. That's what really struck out to me, is that your grandma's grandma
pretty much was like met this Polish wife of her son for the first time,
Yeah.
and just embraced her.
And embraced her
Yeah.
without a thought. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to that? Like, it seemed to be a part of the culture.
It is definitely part of the culture. It has some people are very welcoming. That's part of, and they were the first democratic democratic community, one of the first democratic communities, because of how they formed their confederation and the Minahasan, and through different cultures. I mean, very different cultures, very different foods within it's a pretty sizable area. And so this idea about welcoming, and it's just a part of who we are. And it included the Dutch too, and all the Portuguese and all the other people who were here, even though it was partially a headhunting culture as well. There was still this, and we were fierce warriors. Whenever Indonesia had a skirmish or a fight, they always called Minahasa because it's also a warrior culture. But there's also this dynamic of welcoming. And if someone in Minahasa, the tradition, one of the traditions, if you're in Minahasa and somebody says, "Oh, I really like your shirt or handbag or something," and said, "Oh, here, it's yours now." That's kind of the expectation, but there's cultural rules that, like, if you offer something, that means if someone asks something of you, you freely offer. Now we're blank here.
Yes.
Everybody went blank. But anyways, there's cultural rules that happen, and I mentioned the word mapalus, which is mutual aid. So being there for other people, but it's also you're expected to be there for other people. And so if you're not, you're considered like, okay, you're not participating. There's kind of things in how you treat one another. There's rules on how you treat one another. In all of Indonesia, gotong royong is the phrase that people often use for mutual aid.
Which is interesting because with that cultural background, it's not surprising at all that her great-grandfather became so involved with an organization like the Salvation Army.
Exactly.
Which was an attempt in
Yes.
Western civilization to try and provide the same sort of care for each other in the community.
Right.
By volunteer work.
Right.
And again, another reason why he was a valuable contributing member of society before he was deported, unfortunately.
Yeah, and I think that's something I learned growing up. That was just who we were. Whenever we had an extra bedroom open up, like a sibling or something moved out, someone would always move in because we were always taking in people, always hosting people for dinners, and we're always there for people, sharing things, and that was just who we were.
I want to read the pep talk, or the prep talk, I should say, that your great-grandfather gave the family when they felt that war was coming.
Yeah.
Again, it speaks to your great-grandfather's prowess, his intuition on being prepared, being savvy, technologically aware. Speaking to, I believe it's your grandma and her sister. "Well, kids," Papa began, "it's not something of pleasure that I'm going to tell you, but it has to be done. We are expecting war and must be prepared for it. Many times, Mama told you what war is and what it is like. You kids will see things you will be unprepared for, and that's why I ask you to please listen carefully. They may separate us from each other. If this happens, don't think of us, but think of yourself. Do what the Japanese soldiers tell you to do. Never argue. You might not get enough food to eat, so eat everything you can get your hands on. Never let the enemy see you cry. If you feel like crying, do it while you are alone. I think you kids know what to do in case you are hurt." Goes on a little bit longer, but these kids are 6, 7.
Yeah, 6, 7. Yeah.
And he's given this speech to them. And the forethought that he had about what war was going to look like and the way the Japanese were going to behave as well was very interesting. It's like he knew even culturally, we need to do this and act this way because these are Japanese soldiers. I don't know. That struck me, and I wondered if you have any thoughts on the way your great-grandfather was able to kind of foresee and prepare.
Well, the first thing that's striking to me is that those are conversations that I'm sure families in the United States are saying
Now,
right now, when their families are being torn apart because of our government's policies and how they enact them. So that's the first thing that I thought of, and that when you grow up, when you grow up vulnerable to government interference or cultural warfare, then you're somewhat prepared for that. There's a resiliency that you learn. And this is a person, we call him Opa. So great-grandfather was a person who saw a lot in his life. And because of the nature of being Indonesian, where he was and the influences that you were always having people come in to your place because everybody wanted what you had. You had cloves, you had gold, you had all the treasures that the world loved, and they're all coming to your doorstep. So you have this worldly knowledge of what's going to happen. You see the personalities of people who come in. Maybe they're cultural, or maybe some people are, nice to you when they're stealing from you. Some people are really crude when they're stealing from you. And you're the way you're raised is like, you be generous to everyone, and you be welcoming and open, but you be smart about it. You know how to treat people and how to treat yourself when you're being treated in a certain way. So I would call it worldly smarts, but I think that, and he's of a generation in Dutch East Indies where he grew up with those kind of worldly smarts because he grew up around so many different people and could read people and knew what was coming because of who they were. And there was already familiar with Japan, and just by the nature of looking at the news, I don't know how the news is compared today to how it was before, but you're thinking Japan has already occupied parts of China, has already occupied, has come into, not occupied, but has formed an allegiance with Thailand and Burma. So there's already, the news was circulating. So he knew that Japan was here, because coming to the Dutch East Indies because of the Dutch were there, because those are the Allied forces. So of course they're going to try to take. And they needed the resources, oil, and the cables were under the sea or outside of Manado. So there was a preparation. But I think that he was informed by the world he was living in. And that's the difference.
Yeah.
And that he was a person who believed in being informed.
Well, clearly, he showed his, as you say, world smarts. He made it to the United States, managed to live there, went back, had the foresight to build the shelter in the backyard.
Yep.
And throughout the book, you see the wisdom of his advice, because while it certainly wasn't easy and it was difficult, the whole family managed to navigate the period of occupation.
Right.
With comparatively minimal problems. I mean, there were definitely horrible things that happened.
Yeah.
But it could have been a lot worse. The wisdom.
They could have been dead.
Exactly.
I mean, half of the people died from in this region where they were. Half the people died, so they were among half that lived.
Right, but the idea that go along with them, don't fight them.
Yeah. But you were smart about it. It's not that it's not that you're just giving your pearls to the invading forces. you're treating them with, like my great grandmother had that word, like when someone throws you rocks,
Throw cotton
balls.
Well, exactly. It's the
Kill them with kindness.
the wisdom to survive and adapt.
Yeah.
You know, to go along, but at the same
Yeah.
time do it because you're preserving
Yeah.
your own self.
That was very much in the treaties of the Minnehasan people, in my understanding of that. That was very much the philosophy of the Minnehasan people. And because they got together before the occupying forces of the Dutch came into Manado and said, this is how we're going to treat occupations. We're going to band together and we're going to treat them kindly. But they can't take away what is ours. What is truly ours, they cannot be taken away. And that's this kind of spiritual might too. I think there is a spiritual component, certainly for my great-grandparents. There's a spiritual tone to the book too. And you can choose to read more into that if you wanted to. But that was kind of the way of the land too. There was this spiritual might in their survival, and that's what great grandpa was tapping into too, because he was somewhat of a reverend too from the Salvation Army,
right? And you see that with the passages where your grandmother talks about how she would go into the jungle by herself and sit to
exactly to nature,
whether it's just deal with stress or just to restore herself spiritually to continue dealing with it. And it's clear that this was a culture. These were people who do live very close to nature and draw inspiration and comfort from it.
And this is a girl who used to go to Rockefeller Center, and she'd get all pretty and look at all the fancy things, Macy's and whatnot. She was a city girl, and now she's taking refuge in the jungle. She learned to do that and to be barefoot. And she learned because of her survival mechanism that kicked in when she was in those extreme environments.
And she learned
the language.
Dutch,
she learned all the languages that she could, the Japanese. She would woo the Japanese with the songs that they would teach her.
Back to your grandfather went on to say that they needed to join the Japanese.
Great grandfather.
Back to what we're talking about, and that wisdom of, it's not just self-preservation. If you think about it as being, the father of the family, he's trying to keep his family alive and together, I would imagine. And that's part of the reason. It's not just self-preservation.
Sure.
And that, to me, it's all about
cameras.
It's very easy when we are privileged not to be in times of war, not to be in times of horrible situations where we have to think like that, to maybe not understand that. I think, and especially as Americans, being kind of the dominance that we have in the world today, to think that, join the Japanese. Why would you ever do that? How could you go there? But he just had the wisdom in thinking ahead of why. And what am I getting at is, like, we can be very reactionary, I think, to that idea. And I'm going to stand up and I'm going to fight and I'm going to be this. So I don't know. Would you have anything to say to that?
They were also isolated, so nobody's going to come save them, basically. It's not like nobody who would care about this Minnehasan people. Who would care? The world isn't paying attention. It's not like Minnehasan is on the front page of the New York Times, for instance. You have to dig to section D or whatever to find anything about Minnehasan, but if it's even there. And so this is what I think it shares about, is that so many communities are not in mainstream media attention. And so aren't being paid notice. And those are the people who are really vulnerable. And what great-grandfather was saying during the occupation from the Japanese is that nobody's going to come save you, and you have to save yourself, and you have to find the might and the strength to be able to get through this time yourselves. And we're going to be separated. And so not only that, but it's also not about you, it's about who you can help along the way. And so they were helping even people who were injured, even Japanese people. The Japanese soldiers. So they were helping. There was a time where they were all helping each other because they were actually all isolated in this section of the world where, there was bombs ahead, but you don't know when somebody's going to come help find you food. There's not going to be a food bank open for you to get you. You have to forage for yourself.
There was even an element along those lines where, at least initially, before it really got to the prison camps and situations were a lot more extreme, where they would accept their loved ones' deaths because they were soldiers. And like, well, that's just what happens. And they wouldn't vilify or necessarily hate the Japanese for it. Your mom wrote to hating them because of seeing what they would do to her loved ones directly, like right in front of her.
Right.
But culturally, it seemed like there wasn't that rising hatred and resentment towards the Japanese, but it was more like, well, this is war, this is what happens, and then as we know, a year after the war is done, they're fighting with the Japanese.
Exactly. Well, Grandma, and that light went out, but
yeah.
No.
Grandma, she writes about her rage and her anger toward the Japanese, and that she learned to see them as an enemy, but that she also worked on that because she had friendships with Japanese soldiers, including the person she mentioned, Suzuki, who was a Japanese American, who she doesn't understand why he's here, there in the area.
I don't think that it was ever actually said, but there was the suspicion that she had that is he an American spy?
Exactly, she had no idea, and that's also the thing about war. According to this narrative, is that you don't understand who's on whose side. Like you don't, because you have this blanket statement like, this is Japan and they're the enemies and we're United States and we're the good guys. And that's all true, but then you're all in the trenches together, surviving famine together. And you can't play enemies necessarily at that point. But even though they did, and they still could not trust Japanese soldiers, but they did, and they had to in order to survive. You make deals with people. You help. At times you help each other out.
What do you hope people can take from the book applicable to what's going on in America today? What lessons? We've talked a lot about, the wisdom and the survival ethic of your family and the Minahasan people, surviving occupation with their humanity and morality largely intact.
Yeah.
What do you think readers can draw from your book that is applicable to what's going on now in America?
That's a hard question. It depends who you are. So people reading this book who are of Indonesian heritage are learning more about their own culture and themselves. And particularly if you're Minahasan, you're learning about where the strength of your community is. And so you're remembering that. And that in of itself, when we tell a story that is representative of a culture, and when you're from that culture, you start to embody some of the things that you maybe have forgotten. And so that's the important when we're talking about censorship. And when you censor something, you kind of help remove that part of that person who is represented in that story. And so when you tell the stories, you get to embody yourself again. So that's the one thing that I say. And the other thing is that we learn from history. Because this happened before, because the United States had made laws, Congress had passed laws that discriminated against certain groups of people, this is not new. It's not new. And it happened before that. And some people would say that the United States is still also a colonized country. So American Indians, for instance, are going to be telling a different narrative from their perspective than people who aren't American Indian. So you're going to learn a lot from seeing this perspective, and it's just another piece of the pie to help us understand. And the other thing is that we learn how to survive during tumultuous times. That you cannot lose hope and you cannot lose your spirit, and there's ways to do that. Go into a peaceful place. It's all around us. Turn off the news for a little bit so you can take refuge in your spiritual community, in your cultural practices, in your art making, and there are ways to strengthen yourself in times of tumult. I think that's one enduring message of the book too. And that it will pass eventually, and you got to work hard to find that strength to get through it.
Have the wisdom of your grandfather to
Yeah.
protect yourself, but not do it in a way that'll make it difficult to live with your former oppressors once this does pass.
Yeah, sure. And don't let it break your heart.
Yeah,
You can
absolutely.
remain kind and still fight for the justice that you're seeking.
To go back a little, I know we're kind of, that's like a wrap-up thought.
Yeah, we can.
But the soldier, is it Aikida or Ikeda?
Oh, I think it's, I'm not sure how it's pronounced.
He was
Yeah.
the first soldier that was very cruel and ended up.
The commander.
Yeah, he molested
Right.
one of the girls.
My grandmother's cousin. Yeah.
Yeah, and she was maybe 15.
Yeah.
But then there was that incident that happened with the sword, where he was going to strike down on your grandmother, but she gave him a look, and it like stopped him, and he lowered his sword. And this was coming from a 7-year-old girl. Do you know?
Are you talking about the part? Which part are you talking? Because that happened a couple times. And then there was the part with the cross, with the crucifix that came falling down. Remember that part? And she prayed.
Yeah.
So it was my grandma's twin she was praying during that time because they were gonna. I thought the sword was. I thought that time. Maybe we were talking about a different time, but the time when the sword was at my great grandfather's neck.
Right.
There was that time.
There
was another time when Aikida, I may be saying it wrong, maybe Akita, but it's like he had the sword overhead and he was going to strike down, but something, whether it was a look, or maybe there was a cross involved, I can't remember. But
I think he's remembering the
made
first
him
incident
pause.
when he's basically introducing himself to the family, and he comes in and he's got the sword, and it knocks the cross off, and
The cross falls down, and my grandma. So again, these girls are religious girls, so they're praying, and then something happened when he has a change of heart or something happens in his psyche.
Yeah, and it's like a switch.
And then he makes this sign of the cross.
Oh, okay.
Remember that part? The cross falls, and then he makes the sign of the cross, and everybody's like, "What is this guy? Is he Catholic? Is he like? We don't know what's happening there."
Yeah.
I don't know what the question was, but
It was just if you had any thoughts on that. It was something like his face went white, and he lowered his sword, and he didn't strike, and
And that's an interesting question in and of itself. I mean, it's not part and parcel of your grandmother's story, but at that point in time, there had been Catholic inroads into Japan.
for sure.
But if I remember correctly, this is off the cuff, under in World War II, if you were not a member of the official state religion, you would be punished. And so that just makes me curious if he was maybe, for lack of a better term, passing. And
Sure.
he was a Christian, and he just had a fit of conscience and said, I can't do this, or not. I don't know. I don't think we don't have the information.
If a cross fell down as well, he might have been thinking,
who
"Whoa,
knows?
sign from God."
It's like a
Yeah.
omen. Yeah.
But to me, just the fact that that's a question speaks to the complexity of all participants in conflict,
Right.
and how you can't just paint everybody with a
Exactly.
broad brush,
Exactly.
and how you had everybody from Suzuki, who was the Japanese
Asian
American, who somehow wound up in the Pacific Theater fighting for the Japanese,
Right.
to Aikido, who had a mean streak, but then sometimes was more compassionate. He had a daughter roughly the same age as your grandmother, right?
Suzuki, yeah.
Whether it was,
Who was in the
religion
United States.
yeah, and it's just, to me, what I got from this was a lot of the world is a complex place, and you oversimplify and stereotype at your own risk, because, and again, getting back to the wisdom of your grandfather.
Great-grandfather.
I'm sorry, great-grandfather.
Could have been my grandfather.
Yeah, and
tell his story.
and the people, but the concept that you go along with people to protect yourself, but also with an eye towards the future, because again, who your enemy is now might not be that way in the future.
Yeah.
And you're going to have to live with them.
Yeah.
And you need to comport yourself in a way that makes it possible for reconciliation to happen. Because who knows what the future will bring. And that's just, it's not really drawn out as a theme of the book, but it's something I was just thinking about reading it is, the uncertainty that your grandmother faced, going through all of this. You just cannot say all Japanese soldiers were bad, because it's simply not true. That sort of wisdom of looking at the world, people are complex and do things for many reasons. So,
Yeah, I mean,
that's right.
you can separate the role from the person too.
Mhm.
I mean, they're still a human being,
Right.
even though human beings can do horrible things.
Absolutely.
Speaking of which, Rose.
Rose.
She was briefly in there, but very interesting. And one of the things that jumped out to me about Rose, initially I thought, oh, maybe Rose is trying to soothe Akita so that he won't hurt other girls. I thought that might have been what she was doing.
Sure.
But then it seemed like, no, she was just wanting power and control. But one thing that I really kind of got a kick out of was when she thought your grandmother was a witch.
Oh, yeah.
And it was like an Indonesian perception of a witch. It mentioned it was
Sure.
part of the culture. I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit on that, like what the thought of a witch and the power of a witch would have been to the Indonesian culture.
Well, there's a lot of superstitions and going on in this. So there's that sub layer in the context of the story, and so anybody with a lot of magical powers that could have power over you. So that kind of superstitious or folk belief that there are spiritual powers, and a witch particularly that she was referring to in the story could have power over you. Like they could say something, or they could give a look, for instance, like to Akita, and that it would control their mind, or for an instant, or whatever. And so she was afraid. Rose was afraid of that because she obviously didn't think of herself as a sorcerer or some kind of magical being.
Right. Yeah. No, that was entertaining, and it seemed like your grandmother sort of was like, I can use that.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Oh, good. I think I am a witch because now I have power.
Exactly. Yeah.
There you go.
So you're going to give me back the ring, right? You're going to do
Back
this.
the ring. So if they don't know what the story is, then they have to go read the story. Who's Rose and what's the
Exactly.
story?
Yeah.
Yep.
That's like a good children's book, actually.
I gotta say, in reading this, it didn't take me very long reading through it to be like, why isn't this a movie? Why isn't this?
I know.
Why isn't this a Netflix series? Of course, and especially by the end. Okay, so reading through it, I just had the whole time this sense of dread. I was like, okay, when is the horrible thing going to happen?
Yeah.
When is the family going to be torn apart? Somebody will be killed. When is it coming? And then by the end, without giving away too much, I guess, because we want people to read the book,
Yeah,
to
don't
have
give away
such
the
a
end.
positive ending, regardless of what happened. And there were some horrible things that happened. I mean, it's not to say that it's all a happy story, but yeah, I just couldn't. I was like, this is such an amazing story to be told, and it lends itself to like a Netflix series, you know.
Does
or
that mean
a-
you're gonna donate to donate your film?
Can somebody
cinematography?
How do you donate?
Well, I don't know that it was a positive ending. Maybe for the family.
Yeah.
I think what should have been shared was that there was a long road of recovery. And I think with the nature of war, there is no solvency. Like the war tends to live on in people, and it lives on through generations. So I think that's what people don't quite understand. We think of the part of the story is that this is mostly a civilian story during the war, and often in the United States, when we think about war, we think of it as soldiers going off to a foreign place.
Yeah.
And that's often what we think about war. And then the soldiers coming back, and what we don't realize is that soldiers have a long road of recovery because of what they experienced. And what Grandma always said is that the trauma of war is somewhat different for a civilian than it is for a soldier. When you're a soldier, you have a role. And you can play that role. When you're a civilian and it's happening to you, that's a whole different thing. Even though that the road to recovery, and talking as a mental health counselor, like it's similar. Trauma is similar across groups of people, and it presents in similar ways. But you have not only is it warfare that you think about, it's famine and the disease that comes from malnutrition, which people in this country experience, and in other countries in the world who are suffering from malnutrition. And those have effect long after the period of tumult that we could say is the war times, but the part of recovery. And then, of course, we talk about the revolution in Indonesia. The reason one of the reasons my family is here is, one, Grandma always wanted to return to the United States because she's a citizen and she wants to retain that. And so she had a hard 20 years of trying to get back to the United States. And my grandfather, who was born with a Dutch passport, though he's Dutch Chinese Indonesian, he because of the tumult of the revolution and because of his Dutch citizenship, though he never set foot in the Netherlands, because of that, because he didn't want to become an Indonesian citizen and lose his Dutch citizenship, Indonesia deported him. So my family experienced a second deportation after the revolution from the Dutch, and which was a very extreme time in which the Indo people, the mixed race people like myself and my grandparents' generation particularly, were imprisoned. They were killed, and they were sent out of the country of Indonesia in which they were born, and disinherited to that inheritance because they wouldn't become citizens. They had a choice, but it was a violent time. And so we're also seeing that repeat itself. And so we think of, maybe in the United States, we think of what's happening in terms of citizenship in the United States. It's also international. What we're thinking about immigration, we're talking about censorship. We're talking about militaristic control. We're talking about control of resources. So that's happening on an international level as well. And the United States is a part of that. So there's no end to the story. It's just the saga continues.
Yeah. Yeah. So much I was thinking while you were talking. The disease and the famine and the malnutrition that occurs, you're correct. It's not like the war is over and everything gets better and we're good now. No, some of that stuff you literally live with till the end of your life.
Yeah.
You know, and that could be decades longer that you're...
Yeah. And generations, epigenetically, we know that it changes, it mutates the genetic code in our body. War does that to people. Malnutrition does that to people.
And I think that's one reason why this book is so valuable is, especially in the United States following World War II, for the civilians in the U.S., it was over.
Yeah.
It did end, and
right.
the United States, for a variety of reasons, entered a period of plenty where we had all kinds of things. Whereas the majority of the rest of the world, whether it was revolutionary wars that followed the destabilization of the existing power structure, whether it was economic difficulty, recovering after the war, the civilian populations, even though maybe you lived in a country where there were no bombs going off,
right?
But you did have famine, you did have economic hardship.
The rebuild of Europe.
Yeah. And I think books like yours that preserve these stories and tell them to future generations, especially of Americans, help us have an appreciation of history and how different people and different societies have been impacted by the same events differently. And I think it's very important that we get that perspective. And we learn these things so we have an appreciation of other peoples, other cultures, other countries, and other ways of thinking.
For sure. For sure.
I was struck by, kind of along those lines, just the impression of America. And there was the part in the book where your grandmother listens to the radio that the Japanese had installed. And she heard mention of American ships. And just the reaction of the, hey, we might get saved, or, they know we're here. They could be coming.
They're going to bomb the hell out of us, but we're going to cheer.
Right. This is, I feel it's important because it's the recognition of how other countries, how the world sees America, or at least how they did at the time.
Right.
And again, like when the airstrip was bombed there, there's a quote, I think it was your grandma, and she was thinking, to think that someone on the other side of the world cares about us. It is incredible. What are your thoughts on that? Because that is so important for Americans to remember and recognize. It's like, we just think of how we were regarded at the time as coming in to save from an oppressor, to pull these people out of prison camps. So I was just wondering what you might think about that.
Well, actually, I feel a little emotional. I didn't expect to feel like teary-eyed about that, but the love for this country, the country that, and there's one scene where great grandpa is saying about, like they were talking about the love for the country, and then he was trying to explain that this is a country that deported me. And that they still have this tremendous love for this country and what this country stood for them, someone way across the other side of the planet. And that he risked his life to come to this country. And he came back to the country to end his life here because he believed in the value of what it meant to be an American. And the heroicism of the American people. And so being saved by the United States and the Allies was to them, it reified their belief in the heroism of the American people, and that they would be protected by this American sort of ideal. And that was a guide, and it kept them alive, thinking of their love of the country. And I don't know that I don't know that our talk about United States and being American now, like I don't know that I would think that way necessarily. But if I put myself in those shoes of somebody who risked their life to come to this country, and then who fought on behalf of this country, and then who was saved by this country, to me, like that's really a reckoning. That's really a reckoning. We believe in who we are as a people, and to keep coming back to that, and to have that perspective that we have to remember that who we are. And I think what I understand is that the dream of America and being American was much larger than just this place and just this people or this country. It was something much larger for them, I think.
It's very poignant and relevant to what's happening now. We hear people all the way up to the vice president, and members of his staff trying to say, what is it to be American? What defines who an American is? And it, goes to the same old usual arguments of, how long have you been in this country? How far back generations do you go? And where from the world did you come from? Like that's a defining factor of what makes you American. Whereas this story, and kind of what you were speaking to right now, maybe there's something more to it. Is it a state of mind? Is it an idea? And we've heard that used before, even by presidents, that America is an idea. But I guess my question to you, I'd be curious to know what you think, is what is it that makes us American?
It's such a hard question.
It's broad.
It's a hard question, because I consider myself a traveler, and being an American is being a traveler. Like my family has literally traveled here to be in the United States, and my heritage from my dad's side is very much from American Revolution times, and literally traveled all across the continent through generations from the American Revolution to find themselves now here at the edge of the continent. And it has been a story about migration. American identity for me, when I look at my heritage, it's been about migration, even from the American Revolution. Coming from Europe to the United States and traveling across this land we call America, North America. It's about migration. What else? I mean,
no, I completely agree. I mean, Shane and I, we are actually descended from Pastor John Robinson, who was the one who, I guess, reserved the Mayflower. And so our family our family has been here since Plymouth Colony.
Yeah.
We can trace it all the
Sons
way back.
And daughters of the Revolution.
Yeah. And so, what you were just saying about being an American is about migration. It's absolutely true, because we've had the same experience in our family. The original group landing in Plymouth, and then making their way through the generations down into the South, across northern central U.S. up to Alaska, and now back down here to Washington State.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely true that if there's one constant about the concept of America, is that it is migration, new ideas, new peoples coming in and contributing.
Yeah.
And I think the power of that is represented by the feelings that your family had toward America when they were in Minahasa in World War II. They wanted to get back, how much they valued it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say we're not just migrants, and that's not just the only integral part
Sure.
of our history and what makes us
Sure.
who we are, but it's what were they striving for? What made them think so highly of America? Because I believe in some of the research I'm doing and what we're going to cover with our podcast is the idea of America. Maybe it began even before 1492. Maybe there's
I don't know.
first people cultures that they had ideas and values and culture that, whether it's subversive way down in there, but it impacted, it influenced policies, Constitution, Declaration of Independence, and who we are today. So again, I come back to the idea of what is it to be American? Because it's more than just blood and land that you live on now. There's been a whole lot more that makes us who we are, and a lot of it is up here, I think. Last thing then, one of the things you said you wanted to do when first met you a week ago at the Tacoma Read was you wanted to have this ready for
Veterans Day.
Veterans Day, I'm sorry. Was there something that you wanted to say or a topic that you wanted to get to that
For Veterans Day.
for Veterans Day? Yeah,
Memorial
it seemed like you were
Both.
Yeah. For Veterans
Well,
Day.
no, I just think that it's an important thing, and that I don't know my grandma. I remember, I don't want to give away the book, but my dream has always been to say thank you, really, because I wouldn't be here without the might of the U.S. military and the Allied forces who saved our people, and maybe they were part of causing the mess too, but they also saved our lives, and those people who died for that cause, I think that they didn't die in vain,
Right.
because we've carried on this vision, and to be able to end wars like this and to save people's lives, and that's been the heart of the story too, that Grandma never wanted anyone to experience what she did in war, and it's because of the lives of veterans and their families that we could tell that message and share it with the world. So that's
Absolutely.
Any last thoughts?
nope.
No. Thank you, Brian.
Well, thank you. Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
very much. It's a good discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you once again for watching and being a part of An American Reckoning. We'll close out now with Brian Kimmel performing the traditional Minahasan song that is shown at the beginning of the book. I may pronounce this wrong. Esa Mokan. We'll close out with Brian singing this song and with some of the photographs of Brian and Martha Wallendau's family.
Dedicated to the ones who fought for our freedom, to the ones who died for our freedom, and also to the ones who waited for those that never returned. And this is Esa Mokan. I'll sing it twice. If you know the song, please sing along, but I'm going to sing it in my style, so hold on. And this is the translation. There's one thing of which I will remind you. Do not think of anything else. Remember what WWII, the creator, said. May we be given a long and healthy life. Esa Mokan ganang kuya niko. Te amo marua. Ruagen ang ikaria, Mongolei ngale uman, wiasio powailan, Pakatuan pakalaviran kita nuaya. Esa Mokan ganang kuya niko. Te amo marua, ruagen ang ikaria. Menggaleng aleuman wiasiopo aelan Paketuan pakalaviran kita nuaya Paketuan pakalaviran kita nuaya